What's up, guys? This is the It Ain't Easy podcast. I'm your host, Dom Sharanson. Let's get it. Here today with Anna Farrant. Anna is a former competitive boxer, now wearing many hats. She is the head of partnerships and marketing for Ligne Method Studio. She's the CEO of Empire Boxing and the co-founder of All City Athletics. Anna currently trains a wide range of clients through her bases of Ligne and Turf Living, and she is a guru in the space of marketing in the Vancouver community. Anna, welcome to the podcast.
Love that intro for me. So good.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I was saying earlier, it's a work in progress, but I think every day we get a little bit better.
Yeah. I like it. Sounds like I'm busy, for sure.
Well, you definitely are.
Yeah.
And I think with the intro, like, we know a little bit of your background and what you do, but we don't know the young Anna. So that's where I like to start.
Like how young?
Like elementary young.
Woo!
Yeah, we're going way back.
Okay. I recently found a photo of me wearing biker shorts and a fluorescent top and loafers. So it was the 80s, obviously. Okay. So I was killing it, style-wise. Yeah, I was into musical theater, wasn't into sports, not athletics. So it was kind of a surprise that my whole career is now in fitness. But yeah, I was into song, dance, that kind of thing. Yeah, I was like a regular old kid, I think. Yeah.
Cool. And so with theater, like big singer, big dancer.
I mean, I'd like to think so. Yeah. I had like a short stint in figure skating, but I broke my ankle, so that was sort of sad. But yeah, I mean, a lot of musical theater. I did that up until the age of 14, and then it wasn't cool anymore. Oh. So I kind of digressed into a completely different path, which is another story we can get into. Okay. But yeah, I think I was pretty extroverted. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And did you grow up in like the Vancouver area?
No. Small town, Sydney, BC.
Sydney?
Yeah.
That's Okanagan?
No, that's the island.
Other direction, the island.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, very small town, really beautiful, cute, quaint. Hated it, obviously, as a teenager. But now when I go back, I'm like, this is amazing. Like, it's incredible. Yeah. But yeah, really small, nice, lovely. Yeah, by the ocean.
Cool. Yeah. And you were there for high school as well?
I was, for the parts I attended. Yeah.
Small high school.
Oh, God. Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
So,
everyone knew everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like your typical small town. Like my brother's friends were in grade 12 and they had siblings and they were with my friends. And so it was very much of that dynamic.
Blessing and a curse, I think, in many ways. Like the small school environment is way healthier place to grow up, like through high school, because there's a level of appreciation for everybody. It's a lot less cliquey, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
For sure. I mean, I think, I don't know, it was like my generation, maybe like the baby boomers kids that were just like absolute shit disturbers. And so our generation of kids in high school and middle school were not friendly. Like we were in cliques.
Gotcha.
And yeah, I think after we left, there was this like school spirit really started to happen and things changed. It was, I don't know what it was with that age group, but yeah.
Interesting.
I know.
And you said you had siblings?
I have an older brother.
Yeah, an older brother.
Yeah.
Good relationship?
Yeah, I love my bro. Cool. Yeah, we were close in age. Like, he's 2 years, 9 months, so we had, like, similar friends. I was getting into trouble way before he was, so I don't know. I feel like my parents were sort of shocked when I came along, like, younger child situation. Yeah. He was a little bit more covert about it. So yeah, we were pretty close. We'd go to parties together and like we would wrestle when we get drunk and like we were good. We're still pretty close.
Cool.
Yeah.
When you say trouble, like is that like kind of alluding to like the transition like post high school or in high school? Like what kind of trouble?
Like the transition from grade 8 to grade 9 and where I was from middle school to high school was, I mean, that was a big thing for me. Like, and during middle school, which I think arguably is one of the hardest times in life, grade 6, 7, 8, like that awkward time. I had, cliques and friends and bullying situations and stuff that was unhealthy for my self-esteem. So when I got
Yep.
into grade 9, I just gravitated towards the bad kids,
Yep.
and we took off, and I think I just felt that sense of connection and community.
Yep.
It just happened to be that they were dealing drugs and doing stuff that maybe was not ideal, for a human at that age. And so, yeah, I just kind of connected with them, and we just took off for the whole entire. I don't know how detailed I can really get on
Yeah.
this.
No, fair enough. We're unfiltered.
Yeah, fair, fair.
But yeah, no, it's interesting. Like regardless of good or bad, like at that age, we're so impressionable, but we're also so
Totally.
hungry for that sense of community. So wherever
Yeah,
it comes from first is kind of where we lean into,
for sure. And
right?
I think I'm changing my narrative around how I view myself at that age, because I think for a long time I would say like, oh yeah, I was a bad kid, or I was
Hmm.
up to no good, without that sense of compassion and empathy for like the struggle and like the pain that I felt obviously at that age,
Right.
and the insecurity and all the underlying factors that really motivated me to act out, or whatever you want to call it. So I'm trying to just circle back in a little bit more of an empathetic lens and understand myself from that age.
Okay.
Because I mean, it was like high school or middle school, I was on the honor roll, and then it's like, I'm 14, I'm dropping acid, I'm like stealing stuff, I'm getting arrested. Like
Hmm.
it was like a pretty sharp left hand turn, exit out the gift shop.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Like so, looking back on it, if you could have like maybe one message to that, like 14-year-old self, what would it be?
I think it'd just be about like, I know it sounds so cliche, but just like that level of self love, and just
Yeah.
understanding that I didn't have to do those things in order to like feel accepted.
Right.
And I wouldn't have been able to articulate that. Like I just obviously didn't have that ability at that age. I think I was just really mean to myself in some of the actions and the way I treated myself, or the situations I put myself in, or how I disrespected myself as a woman, or in all those ways. Like I feel as though I would have liked to have been able to console like my self-esteem on that level, so I didn't have to do those things.
Right.
Is what I would tell any, like if I had a child now, or like someone of that age.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, my situation, like I think at that age, was a little bit different. I had like a mother that was very intense with her like coaching, and like a basketball coach, and kind of forced me into
Right.
that like pedigree of like competitive sport. And so when I wanted to go out with my friends, like I was in Center for Performance and all these things that were kind of taking me away from all these like opportunities to get into trouble.
Oh, for
But like
sure.
my closest friends were that friend group,
Yeah.
whether it's like with the drugs or it's like partying and all these things. And so I think of what you're doing with business and with boxing post high
Oh,
school.
yeah. So,
How do you think like sports or like a taste of that at a younger age would have
oh
benefited you?
man, like I think of it now, when I first got into boxing, like right after I got introduced to boxing, had a couple fights, I migrated over to Eastside Boxing Club, which was doing aprons for gloves, which is how I met Cam actually.
Cool.
And
Shout out Cam Hiltz.
shout out Cam. And they still do run a program for youth in the downtown East Side that provides boxing, but boxing provides so much more than just fitness. And I've always felt like, man, if I had that at that age, if I had some sort of connection, or like we were saying, community, or something larger than what I was up to, it would have just been such a game changer. And so, yeah, I think that is part of, maybe it's like my homage to myself, to be able to provide that to other people. And of course, like, now it's adults for the most part, but there's still so much healing that happens through exercise and movement and fitness and punching things, that I feel like, yeah, I get a little bit of that healing through providing that.
I think in the space of like, being in high school, like you need reward systems. And if you look at like, if you're not in sports and, socially being like that super good academic student isn't socially rewarded, like where do the rewards
Yeah,
come from? It's like being that cool person, or being,
totally.
so to have that like goal, or seeing yourself constantly improving and whether it be like boxing or golf or some sort of sport. It's just kind of like a method of control to see, I'm getting better every single day. And
For
this is
sure.
what I
Build
can,
self-confidence.
kind of put all my eggs into.
Not to mention just even like the neurochemical effects of exercise, and the positive effects that have, on individuals, especially at such an age where emotions are running high and depression is, so many people fall to anxiety and depression at that age. Like having that outlet and having the serotonin and the dopamine, all those things that it provides would be, it's just like obvious, but it's not always accessible to people. And I didn't relate to team sports. I didn't have, I didn't feel comfortable in my own body like that. And so for me, boxing was something that was accessible in a way. There wasn't a particular look. Like you didn't have to look a certain way. There was a little bit, like it was a bit edgier. It was a bit more open-minded. I didn't feel self-conscious or like that I didn't fit in.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we should pitch boxing to be more prevalent in high schools.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit easier now too when you have like TikTok and Instagram and all this tech to your disposal where kids can see like outside of the cliques that exist in their community.
That's
they
so
see
true.
like these young guys that are super motivated in whatever their respective hustles are. But then there's also the other negative distractions and all that.
Oh man, I'm so thankful that social media was not around for my demise of high school. I just missed it. Thank God.
Yeah, I was kind of
so sorry to everyone that's listening. That was
right in the mix. I think it's really interesting because even for me, like 2012 is when I left, but like it was the start of like Facebook. People weren't really using Instagram. And then I'm like coaching high school kids now, and it's like you can't get their attention for more than 7 seconds or 15 or whatever it is, because that's
wild.
what the TikToks are doing.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
Such a weird time to be alive.
It really is.
Yeah.
So after high school, like what was that journey like?
So, I kind of had multiple bottoms in my addiction kind of teenage years. And then I had what I thought at the time was like a really good idea, which was going to solve like all of my substance abuse problems. And it was to be an actor, which is not like sometimes you got to do the emotional work to help like solve that. But I was like, no, I'm just going to go like to Vancouver and go to film school and just like not necessarily address the issue that I'm potentially an alcoholic at the age of 19. So I went anyway and went to Vancouver Film School. I lasted 3 months before I broke my leg in half. Yeah, and still kept drinking. Like still was like, no, it's fine. I just fell down a flight of stairs, totally sober, which was obviously a lie, but just like there's layers of self-delusion that happen at that point. Keep trying to like keep the dream alive, showing up to school not sober, and I ended up going on a bender for like 5 days. My family was trying to find me. My friends that I lived with at that time were looking for me, and they had a full-blown intervention. They tracked me down, which to this day I'm like, we didn't have like cell phones in that way or like Instagram to find me. I honestly don't know how they found me, but they found me, tracked me down, came in, had a full-blown intervention. I was like, no, not a chance. Like get the fuck out of here, pretty much, which is also harsh. These are like my bestest friends of all time.
Yeah.
Another layer to addiction, right? You're just like deflecting any support. And then I just kept bouncing from like bar to bar to bar, and I got to this house, and my mom called again. I'm like, how the fuck did you find me?
Right.
Like, what is this? But moms are like that, right? Like they will hunt you down.
Intuition and love.
Yeah, and she called, and she was just like, you don't have to do this. And I was like on my shit, being like, no, I got this. I got a job. I, just deflect. And then I hung up the phone, and I had what I like to call like a moment of clarity, which is just like, we have them all the time. Like the door opens, the window opens, there's like a small crack in your life that an opportunity is coming. And it was so small, and she called back and she was like, you don't have to do this anymore. And for whatever reason in that moment, I was like, okay. And it was like the first time that I legitimately just surrendered to the support. I didn't fight it. I didn't have an excuse. I didn't have like a backup plan, I was like, okay. And that moment of surrender cascaded an entire life change for me. Like, little did I know my friends had already like packed up my shit. But by the time I got to the house, it was already packed up. I was on a ferry, I was home, and I was in rehab like 3 days later. So it was just like a domino effect. And I think that happens like, especially in addiction, those windows of opportunity open, but unless they're capitalized on, they often just shut because we rationalize it. Yeah. And we deflect and move on and like for the next, opportunity to get high or get drunk. And so, yeah, I was really fortunate that I said yes. And I ended up in treatment on the island I was there for like 4 months. And then I stayed there in the hometown for another 9 months in sobriety. And then I came back to Vancouver just before my 1 year sober and reinvented my life here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good for you for making that move. And I think, a lot of people here, I think when it comes to like rehab, they hear about, like the celebrity rehab stories, but I don't think a lot of people, including myself, I don't really know what the process is like in that space.
Oh, man.
And I can only imagine like it can be harsh at times.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Like it is full on. Like they bring your family in and your family sits down and tells you face to face like all the ways that your addiction affected them. It is like humbling as fuck, for sure. Yeah. But I mean, and it doesn't always work for people. That's the thing. That's the heartbreaking thing about addiction is it doesn't. I was ready for whatever reason. It was almost like a sense of relief that it was finally over because I just couldn't do it myself. I needed that intervention. I needed like something to take me out of my situation, but I did truly want it. And a lot of the times people don't, or they're not ready to deal with the things that drove them to drink in the first place, which is hard. Yeah.
And then so you're back at home.
I moved to Vancouver. My family's from the island, so
Okay.
I came back to Vancouver. And then I was like sober and in like a whole new life, whole new set of friends, whole new trajectory. Like I spent 10 years solid working in like mental health and addictions, in my volunteer work, trying to give back to the organization and the programs that helped me get sober in Vancouver. And through that, I ended up working, I don't know why, but I always ended up as someone's right hand that owned a business. So in a variety of different sectors, I was the executive assistant for someone in venture capital. And then I was, helping someone that runs a social enterprise in restaurant in downtown East Side. And then it was, fashion. Did that for 4 years.
So much learning. Yeah.
So much learning and working for entrepreneurs and just learning business. And none of these people went to school. Like none of these people went to business school. They were just like the school of life and like on their hustle or on their thing, right? And I learned so much just being alongside of them. Like for me, that was my school. Like I never even graduated. I never went to college. I'm in college now, but like I didn't have that formalized training. It was like all living, breathing, and eating the shit and seeing how people run their businesses, seeing the best of it and also seeing the worst of it and being like, that's not how I would talk to my staff. That's not how I would be in relationship with other businesses. So I just learned so much that by the time I started my own company, I was like, no, I know. I had the confidence to be able to do that.
So like if you could summarize that to some degree, like what would you say are like the common things that like don't work in like that kind of entrepreneurial space, regardless of the business?
Micromanaging, like people not being able to separate themselves from the product or the business and having to be not trusting their staff. And like, trust me, I get it. Like you have a vision, you have your baby, you want it to look a certain way, but if you can't step away and scale it, it's never, I mean, in my opinion, it's not, maybe it'll grow, but the people that work there, I don't know, like they're not going to like you. Like nobody likes to be micromanaged.
You have to empower like the people underneath you. Of course.
Like these people are working for you to make your business money.
Yeah.
Like if you don't respect them and allow them to do that in the way that they can, that's like potentially better than the way you can.
Right.
And that's the hardest thing is like separating your ego, right? Like especially like nowadays it's like I'm not on TikTok. Like I don't know.
Right.
I need young people working around me so that I can learn like how to stay relevant and current in what's happening in social media. So I think for me, that was the biggest thing, is like that micromanagement, flying in hot, coming into a room, trying to pick shit apart, pissing everyone off, and like
Yep.
just morale is down. Like,
Everybody's talking about the owner or the founder behind their back.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting
and like the
environment.
owner like is taking on so much and spread so thin and just like trying to do too many things. Like that was one. And yeah, just too many projects done well, but not enough projects done amazing. So it's like having their fingers in 18 things, because entrepreneurs, it's like, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this. And now I'm like, no, oh shit,
Yep.
scale it down and do like one or two things amazing.
Yeah.
But that's my philosophy. Like, obviously, like some people are different, but yeah, I've definitely scaled back on having to be a part of too many things.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then I guess it would be the inverse of that, like people that are really good build really good relationships internally.
Everything.
And like what else is like something that would be really good that you see amongst all the successful businesses?
I think it's honestly, I think you nailed it. Like relationships, but not just with staff, with other businesses and other vendors and people you collaborate with. And for me, I feel like that's been my biggest source of inspiration and like win-win situations, and not feeling that sense of competition between even businesses that are potentially competing, like learning stuff from other people and having good relationships with people on like even like the person that delivers, like company that you work with that delivers your toilet paper or whatever it is. I think that to me has created much more success than the opposite, So for all relationships and community for sure.
Before your first venture, which sort of before your first like founding or your first personal venture, what sort of business relationship or job did you have that you learned the most from, do you think?
I think it was she's actually, I consider her like my life mentor. I have a matching tattoo. She has it too. I mean, she's just like, she just doesn't take no shit, man. And she was like, anytime I've had, so I worked for her for 4 years and then we became like super close. I consider her like a sister and I'll call her. And she just has the ability to cut through the bullshit and just make me kind of stand up for myself a little bit more. And whether that's with like, working in a male dominated industry and just like finding my voice and just not being apologetic about being assertive. And that is a huge lesson because I think, in boxing and in life, being assertive and being a female, there's like often a response to that.
Yeah.
I say assertive, people say aggressive, but I'm like, no, it's actually assertive.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was a dude, would it be different? Like, possibly. So she's definitely taught me that and how to be a woman in business.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think I know kind of the answer to this already, but I'm going to ask it anyways. In terms of like being a female in the space, the most problematic or the most common barrier in terms of like communication, like what would that be exactly? Just not having your voice heard?
Yeah, or just having too many of the other voices.
Yeah.
Just talking over you, or just the scales are just tipped a little bit too in one way, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, boxing for sure is very male dominated. I would say I was fortunate enough that both of my coaches, for the most part, were very female forward and in terms of like how they, just how they treated their athletes. One more than others, for sure. But it wasn't until I got behind the scenes and was on the board or was starting to get into promotions that I really saw the politics and the disproportionate representation, not just for females, but of other types, all types of people. And I think boxing has some room to grow. I mean, a lot of sports do, right?
I
For
think
sure.
all of them.
Yeah. It's just it's just the one sport that I have the most experience with, and I'm sure it goes across the board.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think in a lot of especially when it comes to representation and diversity and like gender equity, the higher up you go in the rankings of any sport, you start to see its true colors.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, this isn't anything like the people that are competing at the lowest level, right?
Yeah, and it kind of bummed me out because I started having to sit in these meetings and like hash out all these conflicts and all this drama, and I'm like, the athletes are the ones that suffer, and they have nothing to do with this. Nothing to do with it. It's like egos and all this other shit, and it's just like, it's a bummer, man. But they get affected the most. You know, like people pulling people from fights and being like, my fighter's never going to fight on that show because of this. That happened 20 years ago, or just ridiculous shit. I'm like,
just like personal vendettas.
Grown-ass adults? Like, what is happening? It was bananas. So yeah, I only spent a 2-year term as a vice president on that board. And then I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I can't anymore. So, and being involved in professional boxing, there's just like so much. There's so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what came first for you? Was it All City or Empire?
Yeah, it was All City.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was born out of, so when we were at Eastside Boxing, Aprons for Gloves, that's where I met Jordan. Okay. So we were both volunteering for that tournament, which was amazing. And then we started training together, and we kind of noticed that, at least at that time, there was competitive boxing, like a boxing gym, legit boxing gym, and then there was boxercise. But there was no, like, middle ground, you know? There was, like, chains and, like, just turning out, like, punching to the beat, and then there was, like, getting punched in the face.
Interesting.
We really saw the opportunity to bring legitimate boxing skills to people that don't want to get punched in the face, which is a large demographic, right? And so... yeah, we just merged the two and branded it. You know, we went to New York, we toured, we went to all the best boxing gyms in New York and kind of gained some inspiration and branded it to just be like fun, vibey, you know, still learning something, killer workout. And yeah, just packaged the product there, and we launched it in 2012, opened the Gastown space, I think in 2016. And then I actually just sold it to Jordan in May of last year. Yeah.
Congrats.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's really interesting with All City. I think, you know, you said 2012 is when you started.
Isn't that crazy?
I wasn't even really in.
Like, how old were you? Like 10?
I was grade 12. I was grade 12. But in that time, I knew nothing about Vancouver studios, right? And so like coming into working in studios, I think for me the first time was probably 2018 or 19, and before that till now, like I think there's a lot of studios that have come and gone. There's a lot of like things that have been hot and trending, but the one thing that stays consistent is All City. And you hear about it all the time. So you guys really built a special space there.
I feel that for sure. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's definitely something I've been proud of, and it's interesting to have that full spectrum of like 7 years, I think, in business, at least, or 8, and to leave something that you create. Yeah. It's a whole other, this is full circle, you know what I mean? To be in the inception and then to wrap it up and divorce myself of it so that it's its own thing. It has nothing to do with me. And I knew that pretty quickly getting into it. I realized that if it was about me and Jordan, it doesn't, it can't take a life on of itself.
Right.
And so building up other people, building up other instructors, allowing the community to create and like stepping back, I was like, oh, this is so cool. And the district was like that too. It wasn't just about Gian and Ali. You would see all these relationships form in the gym and like people that are together, like couples and people that are like still super close, and like they wouldn't text me to go hang out. They would just have their own crew, and I'm like, I love this. Like, I don't need to be there. Like, I love watching that create. Like, for me, that was the definition of success. So like whether I'm there or not, I hope that continues, you know. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. And then with Empire.
Yeah.
So is that of the last few years?
Yeah, so we actually started one called Alliance Boxing.
Okay.
And then, you know, typical boxing fashion, we had a fallout with one of our partners.
Okay.
So sadly, Alliance had to be laid to rest. I really love the logo. And born out of that, me and one of the partners moved on to start Empire with another partner who was more in the sports technology arena
Interesting.
to create Empire, which was, similar in the sense that we want to create professional, a platform for professional boxing, but we also want to bring in that digital component, which is in Vancouver not something that's happening. So just making like good quality productions for live stream,
Okay.
but also just like creating those stories about the boxers, the docu-series, like all the really fun content, and just tying that into the brand, into the promotion company. So that was born after. Yeah. But COVID, I mean, nobody
Yeah.
really wants to talk about it, but it definitely puts a damper on events
Absolutely.
and professional sports.
But I think having like that, streaming platform at the front of the mind and like the tech side of things,
Yeah.
gives you an ability to pivot where other
Totally.
people just shut it down.
We did do 2 shows during COVID. I actually think the amateur one we produced was our test one, and it was the first live stream show like that was on live stream since COVID. And it was like putting that on back when like the Health BC would call you and be like, you actually need to swap out that cleaner because COVID on canvas needs to be cleaned with some other, like,
Yeah.
I'm not even joking you, it was 73-page policies that I can't even, like, and then my business partner, we were about the day before the event, and we're talking WorkSafe BC, Health Canada, Health BC, every single governing body has combed through that thing. And the day before, he's like, I was exposed to COVID and I can't be there.
Oh.
So you need to handle the whole thing.
Jeez.
I was like, I had to hang up the phone, but every human that was in that building, I knew exactly where they were at what time and what they touched and what direction they walked in.
Jeez.
Like, it was just bananas.
Yeah.
Yeah, it almost killed me, but we pulled it off.
What about like so I'm starting to learn a bit about like UFC and like what it takes to organize a fight. Like in terms of, like where do you start?
Dude, it is. So we've even like tossed around the idea of doing a docuseries about putting on a show.
I would love it.
Because it is insane. Like the last show that we had, like down to the wire. So we had a belt. We were doing the Western Canadian title belt. Like, big deal to have one in the province. The guy who was supposed to fight Quinnet's guy does one of his scans and like there's something in his brain and he can't fight. Like, terrible. Such a bummer. We're talking like 4 days before the fight. So we have to find another person, which is not easy. It's COVID, so we can only match people in our own country. Also insane, because normally we're flying people in from like Mexico or wherever.
Yeah.
So we find the guy, and then it's like, okay, 2 days before, we have to get that fight approved by the commission. So we need all of his stats. He has to go get his medical. It's like no doctor's offices are opening. You have to like book an appointment, COVID. So we're like, fuck, we'll fly him out a day early, and then we'll try and find appointments in Vancouver.
Jeez.
So we're calling favors. My naturopath did his blood work. Like, we were like picking him up, doing all of his stuff, and then getting it all rushed on the phone to have it in so that the commission could approve it 2 hours before weigh-ins.
Wow.
And it's just bananas.
Yeah.
Like, just like one thing after another. Like, and you are just like flying by the seat of your pants. So yeah, it starts with mostly, I mean, venue is going to dictate, the amount of people, and the amount of people is going to most of the time dictate your budget, and your budget is going to dictate your purses, which dictates your fights.
Okay.
And then you have to work from there.
Purses meaning?
Like prize fighting. So
Gotcha.
The purses,
Okay.
like for the fighters.
Cool.
So we work with a matchmaker. One of my business partners is matchmaking, but it takes years. Like, this shit takes years to like learn relationships and like the politics of boxing, and you just can't walk in and like try and match up a bunch of fighters. So usually they work with matchmakers to help support them.
Yeah.
So yeah, from there we usually, I mean, when you want to, in my opinion, build something from the ground up, I think you need to support the people in your community. So we pick 3 or 4 boxers, professional boxers in BC that we want to help grow and also in return, they're bringing their, group of people to the fight to support them. So it helps us grow. So starting there and then bringing in people to fight them.
Cool. How do we
Yeah.
shape up like locally, like compared to like the globe?
Oh, no, BC. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Work in progress.
Yeah, it's East Coast, like Montreal, Toronto is very dominant.
Yeah.
Edmonton, it would be second, I think.
Interesting.
But one of the promoters out there, I think, has stopped for a bit. I'm not sure. But yeah, Edmonton, Calgary, and then it's tough. Like Vancouver doesn't have a huge roster of people to pull from professionally. And then, with the Olympics and that whole thing, like the boxing being pulled from the Olympics.
Right.
For us, we were like, oh.
For all these sports like golf and rugby sevens, it's
yeah.
like, it's backwards.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
But I mean, who knows? There's lots of opinions on when it's going to come back. But at least for the next 4 years, we're like, well, there's a window for boxing, right? Like there's not like it's mostly for like Olympics. Like most of the time you don't see people like that are 38 years old in the Olympics for boxing, but professional is a little different. So we're hoping that maybe we can transition some of those people that had goals of going to the Olympics to be like, hey, well, now we've got this professional platform. What if you come and turn pro instead? Because, I mean, the Olympics is one of those things. It's like, well, what happens after?
Right.
Right? Well, usually you turn pro, or you could just turn pro and, like, not go to the Olympics.
Absolutely.
So, depends on what your goals are.
No, it's great opportunities you guys are providing that way.
Yeah, so hoping, I mean, again, like COVID's been really challenging. We had a date in February, but with capacity limits, it's just not feasible. Like, it's not a cheap thing to do. And you need capacity, you need revenue to come through. So we're hoping June is our next date. I'm like, come on, like summer, no COVID, right? Like, I feel like that's like a pretty safe bet.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. So
I think we're headed
time.
in the right direction.
I like that.
Yeah.
I think so too. Yeah.
In terms of like professional boxing, how many fights can you do in a year?
Well, if you're Canelo, just kidding. I don't know. I would say like big major fights. It depends, right? Like some of those guys, it's like 2.
Yeah.
3,
Okay.
depending. Yeah.
Because you have to have like a big camp before every fight.
Yeah. I mean, it depends. I don't know. Like a lot of people in Mexico fight all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also way more. There's just a lot more opportunities. Like it's way more embedded in their culture. So I think it's just like there's just way more times to fight. But yeah, I think the idea is like if you're fight ready, your camp could be 6 weeks. It's not like it has to be like, you know what I mean? But it's just like for just getting those big opportunities. Like there's a very small percentage of the population of boxers that are really at that like Canelo, Triple G, like that, level. Yeah.
Yeah, and a question that just with regards to like the evolution of the game, I think that like injuries specifically, head injuries and CTE, it's like such a buzzword in the space of like people that don't play football but want to talk about football, right?
Yeah.
So like my question comes from like other contact sports is like how has the game changed in regards to like practice and like maybe training, maybe rules wise to kind of like combat like that information?
Well, I think awareness for sure, you know, and it comes down to like, also it comes down to matchmakers and commissions allowing fights that are like mismatched, where there's like a more of an opportunity for someone to get injured. And that is like a real fucking concern that people need to be aware of, like making a matchup where someone's had 4 knockouts in the last like 2 years or in the last like of their 4 fights. I think, just that awareness and being way more diligent about it in terms of making those matches and feeling confident to make them. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, so many people get injured when there's mismatches and that's part of the politics of boxing when they want to bring someone up. They're not matching them with like, there's an A side and a B side.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Got you.
Yeah. It's, we try, it's not always a perfect science, but I find fights more entertaining when they're more evenly matched.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like a first round knockout, it's like cool.
Yeah.
You know, like you just know that obviously one guy was way better.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And you paid a ton of money to watch
Totally.
5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So ideally we would find matches that are like pretty even, but again, when you're matching just in one country, it is really hard because
Absolutely.
there isn't a huge pool to draw from. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And then in terms of like development for boxing at the grassroots, like what kind of initiatives do you think would be like best to kind of support the growth of boxing in our province?
I think it has to start with kids, right? And I think just making those programs more accessible. Sports are expensive.
Yeah.
You know, and as you know, like if you don't have certain means and you don't have accessibility to it, like it's hard. Maybe boxing's like less expensive, but there's still like trips and medicals and going to provincials and all that kind of shit. So if there was more government funded programs or, you know, the ability for those kind of sports to be accessible, not just, but also to like girls, you know, young girls or, you know, any gender to be able to try boxing, I think at a young age that helps develop the sport for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like at the grassroots, I was more of a basketball player than I was a football player. And so what I know of like the grassroots development model for basketball is based on like AAU systems and like comparing like club basketball in Canada to club basketball in the States, like the funding is like night and day. Yeah. It's like government funding or every team is like a 401k or like a a non-profit organization. So these companies like Nike, Adidas, they can just throw money at the grassroots. And in Canada, there seems to be like a huge resistance for that sort of support coming from government. It's like there's a lot going into hockey.
Yeah.
And then everything else, it's like you got to kind of fund it yourself.
It's hard to convince, like even with Eastside, like when we were getting the permits from the city, it's like, well, why? Like explain to us how teaching kids how to fight is actually like good for them.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of awareness about martial arts in terms of developing that practice and what it actually provides versus like there's a very small percentage of those kids that would be using, if any of them, their skills for something negative.
Right.
You know, most of the time it teaches you self-control. It teaches you to be confident in your body. It teaches you to not want to be in that situation.
Totally.
But it has a bit of a bad rap just from people's, you know, the stigma of it or just their assumption of the sport.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think like education is really like the upstream approach to like our issue here.
Agreed.
With all sports.
Yeah. But they have the power to change people. Like I have seen some amazing shit, and I'm sure you have too. So I definitely am an advocate for sports for anyone that needs them or wants them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if there's somebody out there that has the power to make the difference.
Yeah.
Hope you're tuning in. And
send them our way.
You know, we poked a certain button. Like moving into Ligne.
Yeah. I like how you say it.
Yeah. Stands for alignment.
Yeah.
What's that about?
So Ligne is the birth child of two of my favorite humans, Taryn and Katie. Cool. And it's a Pilates method certification program. So I'm also certified in Pilates through them. And during the pandemic, Katie created the certification, but they started an on-demand platform. So awesome. Amazing. So doing just like the on-demand Pilates, Taryn's a kinesiologist, so she also does strength and conditioning, HIIT, all that kind of stuff. And I've known Katie like 6-7 years. She was one of my first clients. I trained her boxing. She's just like the sweetest, loveliest lady, and then she'll just punch me so hard. The dichotomy is my favorite. And I trained her up until she was 9 months pregnant with her second child. And I'm telling you, with the extra baby, it was like painful, the punches.
Yeah, a little.
Oh, yeah. A
little extra weight.
Yeah. So they both love boxing. And, you know, after I left All City, there was this little transition time where I kind of just felt like without home, you know? And they actually call it the House of Ligne, and they opened up their house to me, and they were like, you know, if you want to come and do your privates here, and they were just like very sweet about it. And, you know, if you want to do the certification and, you know, little nudges here and there. And I did it. And typically Pilates and slower types of movement, elicit like rage.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I do.
go to a Ligne class and talk to me after. Like,
Yeah.
so it was an interesting journey for me to dip into a style of movement that was very counterintuitive to what I typically understand myself as. Like, boxing fits with my narrative or my like experience of the world.
Interesting. Yeah.
So doing something that was like slow and connecting and more integrated and all these like a little bit more of like of a feminine energy, if you even want to call it
Yep.
that, but just yeah, it was wild, and I experienced just a different side of myself where I realized that, oh man, like movement, at least at this stage in the game for me, has to be holistic. It
Yeah.
can't just be fucking go forwards, and without the respect of like having that swing the other way. So once I started to integrate like breathing and breath and meditation and like slowing down, I I was like, oh my God, this is like a whole other side of myself. And it brought a whole other type of healing. And I think both are so important, right? Like the hard, the fast, but then also the slow and the soft. And so I really credit them to allowing me to feel that part of myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting with again, these are basketball references, but I've always noticed in like the power sports, basketball, like I'm sure boxing is the same, football, the best players are the ones that have like multiple speeds. You might not be the
Yeah.
fastest, you might not be the slowest, but you have the ability to change your speed and be so fluid without like throughout
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
And so guys like Shaquille O'Neal, LeBron James, like they all do these things in secrecy, and they were, because that was their like X factor. They didn't want to tell
Yeah,
people,
yeah, yeah.
but they all have the mega reformer at
Yeah,
home.
yeah.
Or Shaq was doing ballet, and when I started researching these guys and learning kind of about their habits, I started, well, maybe I should take this like Legree class. Maybe I should go to Pilates.
Totally.
And honestly, like you're saying, like that balance, the hardest thing I've ever done is like to humble myself, be amongst like, this incredible feminine energy, if you want to call it that. And my game improved significantly.
For
It's
sure.
like, yeah, giving you those like multiple speeds and having that fluidity is just such a different experience.
And I think it's because we are not one-dimensional beings. Like, we are multi-dimensional. We have different sides to ourselves. We're not, one day we're one way, 1 hour we're another way. And I think it's like honoring the human experience to just really tap into all sides of yourself, and explore yourself differently in different ways. So yeah, I love them for it, and that's where I do most of my privates out of their studio in Gastown. We're going to be launching classes there, and then we just started an on-demand boxing that's going to be on their platform as well.
Awesome.
Plus, I'm doing their sort of marketing and sponsorships as well.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it York Athletics?
Oh, love them.
Yeah. So I see you rocking their shoes all the time.
All day long.
So that's one of your partnerships. Are they Vancouver
They're
based?
based out of Boston.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so I met them. I was in Portland, and I found their shoes, and they didn't have dude sizes, and of course Jordan was jealous. So when we got back to Vancouver, I reached out on Instagram. I was like, hey, do you guys ship to Canada, and like, do you carry men's shoes? We'd love to have them. They were like, no, we don't ship to Canada. And I was like, not good enough. So I sent them an email, said it again. I was like, hey, I can do a bulk order. Like, we're a couple trainers here, blah, blah, blah. And someone read it and like didn't really respond. And I was like, that's not it.
Yeah.
And then the owner read it and he got back and he was like, no, like 100%.
Yeah.
And he's like,
Light bulb.
Yeah, he asked if he could fly me down to launch their women's campaign.
Awesome.
So I went down to Portland, did their first shoot for their women's line with them, and then we've just been super tight ever since. And then they started shipping to Canada, which opened up the market here, and we're, I think, number 2. I think it goes Boston, LA, Vancouver for sales.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
and
really
that's
cool.
like full on because we just like didn't take no for an answer. And they're amazing. They're a small family run business. And yeah, during COVID, I think they really did suffer because a lot of the e-commerce businesses that were already only doing direct to consumer, when everyone pivoted to online, they got they just didn't have the budgets in terms of like ad space or
Right.
covering shipping or how fast everyone else was that had, that pivoted, that already had like these huge, enormous budgets behind them. So I love them, support them all the time. Check them out.
Awesome. Shout out York.
Yeah, shout out promo code Anna times YM.
Yeah, we'll throw that on the YouTube
Yep.
for sure. In closing,
Yeah.
a couple of like fun, like
Rapid fire.
I'm sure you've heard like G's check-in questions. They're kind of similar.
Okay.
Word association first is like if I say like a word or a phrase, like what it means to you.
Okay.
The first one is
It's not like charades, is it?
not really.
Okay, 'cause
No.
I get really shouty.
Trauma-informed movement.
What does that mean to me?
Yeah.
I think it's as a teacher or as an individual.
Maybe as a teacher.
As a teacher, I think it's about allowing people to be in choice about their own bodies.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about that myself.
Yeah, I think I noticed that a lot, and Aline is very good at that, in just how we create the opportunity for people to discover within themselves what feels comfortable without creating the space to tell them what to do necessarily, without a variety of options. Yeah.
What about just wellness?
Wellness. Wellness, the words integrated come to mind. Holistic. Yeah, integrated. All elements.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you could live inside of any movie, what movie would it be and why?
Oh, no. So many just come to mind, and then I'm like, I do not want to live inside of Fight Club. Like,
Yeah, some great movies, but like in terms of like
I'm
the
like,
living space, the
lifestyle.
environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe the Avatar movie.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that'd be really cool.
that's up there for
Yeah,
me
it's
too.
kind of lovely. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Anything with dogs too.
yeah,
Yeah, I'd live there.
cool.
Yeah.
Your number one celebrity and why?
Like in what way?
Like who do you look up to the most?
Oh, celebrity that I look up to?
Yeah,
Mm.
could be friend or figure, local celeb.
Local celeb. I'm gonna say Gian. Just kidding.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I don't know if I have like a celebrity
And
crush.
that's fair.
Yeah.
That's probably healthy.
Who's yours?
I'm a big Leo DiCaprio fan. Yeah.
Nice.
So much range.
Yeah. He is a great actor. If I were to choose a boxer, Clarissa Shields.
Okay.
Her energy. Have you seen?
I haven't.
Okay,
no.
you
I'm
gotta
gonna look
watch
it
the
up, though.
documentary T-Rex. It's her
T-Rex.
documentary. She was 2-time gold U.S. boxing Olympic champion,
Cool.
and then turned pro. And the documentary is all about like the lack of sponsorship for female black athletes in the Olympics and why she turned pro. She's in Flint, Michigan, and she's just fucking powerhouse.
Awesome.
Yeah, you look her up. Her energy all day.
T-Rex.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well-
She's actually, we did a mural in All City, and she reposted it. One day we tagged her in it, she reposted
Cool.
it. Yeah, it was pretty special.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wishing you all the best
Yeah.
with Empire Boxing.
Thank you.
With all your work at Aline,
Yeah.
at Turf, and all the future ventures that are to come for you.
Thanks for having me.
Really excited about your upcoming marriage as well.
Me too.
And it was amazing to have you on the podcast.
So
Super
good.
insightful, and I'm sure everybody has something different they'll take from it. So,
Cool. Thanks so much
Yeah.
for having me.